who you are on a spiritual level. It is not something they have to deal with. It is something they have heard about, but again, find it challenging to understand or comprehend how such a thing is possible. It's not their path to understand that. It's the path of a first contact specialist or a social engineer to understand that. And therefore, they don't worry about it. They just don't really understand how to comprehend it.
And is it our path to remember, to figure out,
Yes,
remember?
yes. That's how you grow.
And is it by doing the formula that we can remember?
That's certainly the strongest way. That's why we give it to you. It's the simplest way that you don't have to overcomplicate or overthink. And within the formula, of course, there are many opportunities to be attracted to do things in the way that are representative of your individual passions that are unique to you. So within the formula, there are many unique ways of experiencing it, but the formula still works for all.
Wonderful. I'm interested in understanding how your people feel and perceive the excitement of meeting us when open contact happens on Earth.
We are very excited about it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be engaging with you because, again, we only follow our passions. So the recognition of joining, as we have with many other civilizations, whether it be in a structured interstellar alliance or even a loose association or friendship, is expansive to us to allow us to experience different ways that different beings have of relating to the idea of existence. It expands our understanding. It expands our knowledge. It expands our experience. You have experiences we do not have, allowing us to experience some of those things, to understand how different beings can create challenges that allow them to discover things in a very different way than the way that we do or other civilizations do, is very exciting to discover because it adds to the overall uniqueness of all the different facets of all that is and allows us to understand more of all the ways that all that is has of experiencing itself, which expands our understanding of the infiniteness of all that is. This is very exciting to us.
Will music play a significant part in upcoming open contact? I heard about an event where ET ships respond to our music festival lights. Music is often a way that humans raise their vibrations. Is there any chance that we can witness a mass sighting with some of your representatives during a music festival? It would be great to see your lights in the sky joining the rhythm of our music.
Yes, this is quite possible and maybe very probable, not necessarily right away, but in the years to come.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about the music festivals that you might like?
No,
Okay. What is your current ship height above Sedona?
approximately 1,500 miles
Are you at Bell Rock?
above Bell Rock, yes.
I've,
1,500 miles above Bell Rock.
I've recently seen ships near my house that I've previously not seen. These ships appear to be descending lower to the ground. Is there a reason for this? What is happening?
Again, as you all expand your consciousness, you also sharpen your senses to start peering into other dimensions. These things have been around you all the time. Like I say, there's a lot of traffic around your planet. But the idea is that they have usually been outside the vibrational frequency of your senses. But as you expand your consciousness, you can start to see things that you couldn't see before.
Which country is open contact most likely to occur first as you read the energies now?
Who says there will be a first country? Who says open contact won't happen simultaneously all around your planet? Why would there just be one country? That's not open contact.
Right. Can you tell us more about a unique civilization in our galaxy that we've never heard of before?
One moment. One moment. We are looking for what might be most relevant. We have not told you yet about a civilization within the Interstellar Alliance that travels. These beings are in constant motion. They are not bipedal, they are quadrupedal. 4 legs, as you would understand it. They are constantly moving. Very rarely do they rest. Very rarely do they stop. Their world is patterned in such a way as to allow them to travel long distances. They do this as a matter of gathering information. They do this as a matter of learning. They are constantly, almost constantly on the move, even moving while they rest. They have the same kind of capacity that your dolphins have to have half of their brains sleep while the other half remains awake so that they can constantly move, constantly learn. These beings have created a society that exists within nature in such a way that they have, shall we say, guided nature, trained nature to create certain structures that they use as shelters that they can pass through. But most of these shelters are very long and tunnel-like because they keep moving. And the shelters provide for them information, entertainments, stories, experiences as they move through these long natural tunnels, either in the earth or made of their version of trees or plants. The beings are ranging in size from about the size of what you would call an medium-sized dog to the size of a small horse and sizes in between. They do have a head. They do have 2 eyes. They have, similar to the idea, as an extension off the face, a muzzle with nose and mouth, but they are not really dog-like. They are not really horse-like. It is quite different. They sometimes will wear certain kinds of drapings, but not really clothing as you understand it. The temperatures on their planet don't necessarily require them to wrap themselves in something to protect against the weather or the elements. It is generally relatively mild. They do have rain. It is rare that they experience things like snow. Therefore, you would find the environment there relatively pleasant, relatively even temperatured. These beings call themselves something that would translate to you in your language as the phrase moving with the wind. But we cannot replicate their language for you. It is completely non-human and requires the kinds of vocal cords that they have that cannot be replicated in a human body. But the translation of their name for themselves is like moving along with the wind. Does that answer your question?
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yes.
You've spoken about stars and civilizations within the Milky Way, the Pleiades, Orion, Sirius. Have you traveled to other galaxies outside the Milky Way?
Our civilization and many members of it have had experiences in other galaxies, the Magellanic Clouds, as you call them, and even the idea of the Andromeda Galaxy. It is relatively rare that we venture outside what you call the Milky Way galaxy, but again, do remember that we are in our natural state, another parallel reality altogether. There are some slightly different configurations of galaxies in our reality that you don't have in yours, and we have visited some of those as well. but it is rare that we venture beyond the edge of the galaxy that you would call the Milky Way galaxy in our reality.
Be a major contact event in 2026 or 2027, and we need to raise our vibration in order to connect with the ETs. Does this mean that by 2026 we will have raised our vibration high enough to physically connect with ETs? Is our raising our vibration to a certain level the threshold that will catapult us into this major contact event that you're describing?
While raising your vibration is essential, the event that we are describing in your 2026, 2027 is not the kind of contact event that you may think it is. It will be the beginning of something, the crossing into another era, another level, but it will be for reasons that will not necessarily involve immediate physical contact. Raising your vibration is important to help accelerate into the time when physical contact will be available to you. But the incidents that lead up to this major contact event, while they will be helped by raising your vibration, will not necessarily be for the reasons that you think. We cannot go into too much detail at this time about exactly what causes this event.
Regarding the major contact event foreseen at the time we were just describing, dear Bashar, we would like the ET civilizations involved in this future event to know that we are willing to help at any point during its preparation, if appropriate. We don't wish to be passive, but would be honored to begin joyful interplanetary cooperation in the spirit of beautiful relationships as we journey through the universe together.
Well, all right, but again, follow your passion, follow the formula, raise your vibration. The major contact event will not necessarily be an immediate opportunity for what it is you are talking about, but it will lead to such if you continue along the path of your true self. And the reactions and responses to the major contact event will be observed by many and will determine exactly the schedule, so to speak, the agenda, so to speak, for how open contact may proceed from that point forward.
You've described how direct physical encounters with extraterrestrial beings like yourself and others of higher vibration can cause psychic shock if the person meeting them hasn't raised their vibration enough. As some humans raise their vibration by following their passion, can something similar happen between those humans of higher vibration and other humans whose vibration is not as high? Or would that manifest directly due to the flavor of vibrations here on Earth?
Yes, it'll be somewhat different, although you may experience the difference more in the direction of people not necessarily associating with each other anymore if they are in fear of examining themselves, in fear of being aware of the different negative or fear-based belief systems within themselves. It is possible that humans of higher vibration may coax those fear-based beliefs closer to the surface, but because you are all on Earth, everyone still has the idea of a choice to avoid or ignore those that they may be afraid to face because it reminds them of things that they may not want to look at within themselves. So while it is possible that the higher vibration may coax people to look at themselves on Earth, it is a little bit different in that they have the choice to move away, walk away, ignore that vibration. So it will not be identical to the effect that would happen if you were, for example, to meet one of us.
Okay, thank you. Just as you and a number of Earth futurists have expressed the need for us to realize that we are part of nature rather than separate from it, I'm curious about what events would lead to that awakening and a transition to an Earth where that is the case. Does open contact, for example, contribute to that, and how?
Of course, open contact would contribute to your understanding of your expression as nature because it is built into the vibration of many extraterrestrial species to understand themselves that way as well. So that vibration is part of the formula of the frequency you would experience from all of us because we understand ourselves as expressions of nature. Therefore, it comes with the package, so to speak, that you would begin to face things within yourself that would put you in touch with your expression as nature as well.
Okay. And how will universities in particular change after first contact?
Well, obviously, there will be more discussion, more exploration of the idea that you are not alone in the universe. There will be courses that will begin to teach you about the different extraterrestrial species that would be appropriate for you to experience. There will be deeper understandings of certain ideas in the past that will come into the present again, because certain knowledge has been, shall we say, lost over time that will be reclaimed, regained, and re-explored. There will be many different kinds of investigations into your own nature as well as the nature of the extraterrestrials that you will be experiencing in open contact. Plus, you may allow different techniques of teaching to occur in your universities and other levels of schooling that will be more reflective of interactive experiences based on the way that extraterrestrials may explain to you, as we have explained to you from time to time, how it is we learn things, how it is we teach things, more by interactive experience than the idea of rote memorization. So your techniques of teaching may also change based on what you are willing to adapt to and adopt into your schools based on what you learn from us.
Sounds really exciting.
Yes.
What will open contact mean for the great apes on planet Earth? Will the higher energies of ETs also accelerate their evolution to the same intellectual standard as humans?
No, it will be different. But as we have said, open contact is not just with humans, it is with all life on your planet. But each species has its own direction, its own path, its own evolutionary goal, so to speak. It will not be the same as humans exactly, but they will advance, they will evolve, but it may not be something that you can necessarily relate to right away unless you are sensitive to their communication and they become sensitive to yours in a different way. It will mostly involve the idea of telepathy rather than the idea of having the same expression of intellect that humans do.
So is there a frequency that telepathy is a natural, automatic kind of thing?
Yes, the frequency of unconditional love.
And what about like in cycles per second?
Well, the idea, again, is that when you operate above 200,000 cycles per second, then it becomes more natural to experience the idea of telepathic communication.
And that experience of telepathic communication can be experienced as like hearing the person's voice talking to you in your head?
It can be, but true telepathy is more of a simple receiving of an entire block of information in the form of suddenly simply knowing what the other person is intending. It may come as images, it may come as voices, but it is more likely simply to come as a knowing. You just suddenly know it. There's no mistaking it. It cannot be mistaken for imagination. It is simply that the knowledge is suddenly within you as if it has always been there.
So is there such a thing as like a telepathic conversation with another person that's in another room because your frequency is so high?
Yes, although such a conversation wouldn't last very long in terms of time, because again, you have instant knowingness, an instant exchange of knowledge and perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Do ETs ever reveal themselves to people flying in airplanes?
Yes, sometimes. You have many what you call UFO reports of people in airplanes saying that they saw craft outside the airplane windows.
Should we high five them?
If you wish. They may high five you back if they have 5 fingers.
You mentioned there will be a new Earth satellite, which represents male energy when male energy is more balanced in the future. Can you tell us more about that?
All we can say at this time is that it will be something akin to a captured asteroid that will fall into a regular orbit around your planet and in a sense become a much smaller secondary moon.
Do you have any timeline on that?
No.
Our CPUs are currently upwards of 100 billion transistors on them. Are there transitions for Sasani CPUs in your time?
Transitions?
Transistors.
Oh, we do not use transistors. What you may recognize as a computer or a form of AI is purely made of intersecting beams of light. And the equivalent would be 150 trillion operations per second.
Interesting. If you've never had names, then how do you address each other and identify each other? For instance, if you're referencing another being in a conversation, how do you identify that entity to the person that you're talking to?
Remember that our society is purely telepathic, and everyone has a signature frequency. Therefore, by mirroring or reflecting the signature frequency of another individual that is unique, everyone would know exactly who we are referencing.
Okay. This person says that they've been getting a strong buzz when they watch your seminars online in real time, and that they've also gotten a similar version of that if they miss the transition and they watch the recording afterwards. Is this a preparation for something?
Well, it's a preparation for raising your frequency because the buzz you're feeling is the matching of the frequency that we give off. Even if it's not a live session, the idea of our frequency is sort of embedded in anything that represents the session, like a permission slip. So even though it may not feel completely identical to a live session, the frequency is still embedded in any projection of the communication that we have delivered. Therefore, you will still, if you're willing to match our frequency, still feel some mirroring or reflection of that frequency within you, which you may interpret as a kind of buzz of electricity or in some other way.
So for many people, because you're coming in at a higher frequency, as soon as we match that, we start experiencing ourselves from that level.
Yes. Yes. And again, since everything is embedded in existence in space-time, then all you're doing by watching a replay of the communication is, again, you are tapping into that frequency to some degree and allowing yourself to begin to identify and mirror and match that frequency, because all information is here and now.
Like some people have noticed that if they listen to one of your recordings, every time they hear something different. And
Yes.
my understanding is that has to do with the information is holographic in that sense. So it will, how does that work? Maybe you can explain.
Well, you have said it yourself. It's holographic, which means you can have many different kinds of layers of information, but being a holographic structure, you will only perceive what you are the vibration of. So listening to it one time or perceiving it the first time, you may be of a certain frequency that only receives a certain amount of the information that is embedded in the transmission. But if you change your frequency, the next time there are different layers within it that have always been there, but may have been inaudible or invisible to you. But by changing your frequency, now you can pick up on those layers because they are of a different frequency as well.
So that's very exciting, because that means that even if a person evolves to higher and higher frequencies, every time they listen to one of your transmissions, they have the opportunity to hear information that they were not able to access before.
Well, yes, and it might not even be that they hear the information. It might suddenly be that by listening to it, they are suddenly receiving an inspiration they didn't receive before. Again, it may come telepathically. It may simply present itself automatically and instantly in their mind as a fully fleshed out idea or concept or inspiration that they didn't have the first time. It may come that way. It's not necessarily something that would be delivered to them auditorily.
So that means even after all of us are long gone, listening to one of these transmissions will provide that opportunity to whoever is listening.
Absolutely. Because everything exists in the now and never goes away.
It's phenomenal.
Yes, it is a phenomenon.
I believe that every species has its own limitations and difficulties to overcome. What are your challenges? How do you deal with disturbing frequencies? And what does a training day or school for your folks look like?
Well, in dealing with different civilizations, which is what I do all the time since I'm a first contact specialist, it's about understanding and investigating and deeply identifying with the civilization. This is why we often experience the idea of having an incarnation or a life in the civilization so that there is a deeper understanding. And that's part of our training, is to actually live among you as one of you until we have enough knowledge that we can then deliver this information in a way that makes sense to you. But on our own world, as I was trained to be a first contact specialist, the mentor of what you may call the training, in this case being my father for my class, creates a telepathic reality that actually appears to be completely and utterly real. And we go through different exercises and different contact scenarios in that telepathically projected reality, again, as if it is completely and utterly real, like we are truly interacting with that civilization. But it's a simulation. It's just that a mentor has the training to project a telepathic reality that contains the ability to make us believe that it is actually happening and not just a training exercise. That way we get the full experience of it, and any errors come back to us fully in our understanding of what the consequences would be if we actually did make that error in interacting with the actual civilization. So it's ingrained within us very deeply by experiencing it as if it is real.
So that kind of sounds like what happens to us on Earth, but we don't see it as a projection of consciousness until we become more aware.
In some senses, yes.
Because the experience is the most valuable aspect. Is that correct?
The experience is the only way anyone actually learns anything.
That's amazing. Have you ever killed another physical being, even a plant, in your life? And have you ever brought back to the physical life something after death?
No, I have never killed anything, not even a plant, in my reality. The closest analogy or answer to the second question would be, again, in birthing a new member of our society, we do create a vibrational medium, a vibrational bubble in which the spirit can actually form a physical body. If you want to call that bringing someone out of the spirit world, even though it's not, quote unquote, bringing them back from the dead, so to speak, that would be the closest analogy of allowing a body to form that a spirit can use or a soul can use to experience our reality in our quasi-physical nature.
That would be similar to birth in your reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but not in a physical body, in terms of the female or any particular being actually giving birth through their body. This is done outside the bodies in a energy bubble.
So is it a joint manifestation between you and a female?
It can be. It doesn't always have to be.
It can just be done on your own?
It can be, or it can be done with any number of members, depending upon what it is the soul wishes to experience as the body that is formed for it to participate in our civilization. It can be done between the same genders. It can be done between multiple genders. It just depends on what the purpose of the soul is and what kind of body needs to be created and what kind of theme they are exploring.
So what does it look like when you see this person manifest in the sense that you're describing?
There is a kind of clear energy bubble that can be perceived. There will be a burst of light within it, and a small energy structure will form within it and will build very quickly into the cellular structure of a body made out of quasi-physical material. It usually only takes about anywhere from 5 to 30 seconds.
So is this the same as Asasani beings creating a birth, right? Is what you're describing?
That is what I'm describing.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
That's amazing. Certainly much easier than what the women on our planet go through.
In a sense, yes, it's all relative.
Are there extraterrestrials who are involved in the hybridization program that are not grays?
Yes.
And can you tell us anything about that? Do they do this to further their own culture and their own reproductive needs, or what would be the purpose of that?
Not so much, but they are more in an assistive, shall we say, role. Because you have heard tell that when people go on board the ships and they know they are involved in the hybridization agenda, they have also reported beings like the mantises, what you call the tall whites, and several other kinds of beings that are acting in an assistive role for the idea of helping with the evolution of Earth into the sixth hybrid race. So, no, other civilizations don't necessarily use the DNA in the same way the Greys have to perpetuate their culture into creating hybrids such as ourselves, but they are playing an assistive role because they are connected and, shall we say, watching over and observing and participating in the evolution of humanity on Earth. Because as we have said, there are many different kinds of stories being played out here. So it's quite exciting.
Who exactly issued the original quarantine of Earth? Was it a collective vote or the decision of one individual to gate humans off of interstellar travel for centuries? Are those beings still physically alive to see the results of their decisions?
There is a misunderstanding in the way this question is being asked. The so-called quarantine is for your benefit. The idea is that you're not prevented from interstellar travel. If you were open enough to create techniques technologically to have interstellar travel today, you could. It's just that the quarantine is for the purpose of not intervening or interfering in any negative way that would interfere in your process of discovering who you are. You are not prevented from doing anything. And the idea of the origin of this is between your collective consciousness and the collective consciousness of your spirit guides and the collective consciousness of the Interstellar Alliance in recognizing the sovereignty of the paths that you have chosen as a collective species to explore reality and to evolve in the way that you have deemed necessary for yourselves. We help by letting you know that there may be smoother and easier ways and faster ways to do this, but the decisions really are up to you as to when you are ready for the idea of removing the quarantine. You are no longer quarantined as far as we are concerned. It's now in your hands and up to you to determine what you are capable of doing when you bring your belief systems into alignment with your expressions as reflections of all that is.
Okay, and this question comes from someone's 9-year-old daughter, and
Yes.
she wants to know if it ever snows on Asasani.
Not really, because our axis tilt is not as severe as Earth's, and our orbit is nearly circular around our star. Most of our temperature is temperate, it's moderate. Somewhere around, generally speaking, give or take a few degrees, what you would call about 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, on the North and South Poles, depending on certain conditions that happen at rare times, there may be a buildup of frost, there may be a little bit of ice, but it does not snow on our planet in the way that you are familiar with experiencing snowfall.
And do you have a pet, or did you have a pet while you were growing up as a child?
We do not keep pets per se in the way that you do. There are animals on our planet that come and go freely, and I have many associations and many relationships with different animals on my planet. ever since I was a child and even into my adulthood. So we interact with animals in much the same way that we interact with the people on our planet and the plants on our planet. It just goes off the pure synchronism of what needs to show up when it shows up, and that's exactly the right timing for that interaction and relationship to go on.
Have you ever experienced your version of swimming with the dolphins and the whales?
Oh, yes.
Like physically, have you gone into the Essassani Sea and swam?
Yes. Yes. There are actually special pools that exist in certain areas, channels that lead into certain kinds of pools where the version of aquatic life that we need to interact with can actually swim more deeply into the land so that different beings can interact with them without necessarily being out in the open ocean. This is something similar to what used to happen in your Atlantis in ancient times, where certain temples were built in such a way that the dolphins and whales could swim into the temples and thus interact with people. So we have this tradition on our planet where there are certain places where channels, canals, and pools are created and exist, some in natural form and some artificial, where certain aquatic beings can come in and interact more deeply into the land.
Do you have to wear a snorkel when you do this?
No.
So can you breathe underwater?
No, but we can hold our breath for a long time.
How long?
On average, about 20 minutes.
So you're like a cetacean.
In many ways, and again, remember, we are quasi-physical. So the idea of breathing is not completely necessary in the same way that it is for you, at least not as often.
And what would be the largest cetacean on your planet?
What we have termed the Asiza, that which is sort of a whale-like creature that has stripes a little bit like a zebra.
How big is it?
It can range from about 30 feet up to about 100 feet.
And do you have other types of cetaceans?
We have some of your dolphins on our planet that have been transplanted.
Have some of them come back here again?
A few, on rare occasions, but most remain on Essassani.
Very exciting.
Yes.
If someone were to, in your time, choose to act in a way that was disharmonious or even rebellious or break laws or whatever, what happens? Is there law enforcement? How does this work?
Well, nobody does that in our civilization, so it's kind of only a hypothetical. If it were to happen, which again is not something that actually has happened in our civilization, the idea is that what you call the laws are simply the laws of existence. And because there is a certain kind of momentum that exists energetically in our planet, because we have been choosing positive ideas for so long, it is very challenging for us to actually go in the other direction. There's actually kind of an inertia that makes it more challenging for us to choose to do things that are negative or fear-based, or do something against the synchronism that perpetuates our society. It would be like, if you want a simple analogy, like attempting to move in a direction that is filled with molasses. You simply have a struggle going in that direction because of the momentum of the direction that we're all synchronistically moving in. So those things don't really happen on our planet, and the self-regulating energy of the synchronistic way in which we function usually, if anyone were to go in that direction, would usually push them back into the positive direction because of the momentum that is built in our evolution.
So does that mean that anyone who functions at the frequency that your civilization does
Yes.
would automatically always choose positive rather than expressing any negative?
Yes, unless there is a very, very specific reason why something different would need to exist in the society. And more commonly than not, if such a thing were to happen, it would only be kind of like, well, what you would call a stage play. It would be something that would be explored because it would be practice for dealing with civilizations like yours that do make negative choices and fear-based choices. And for that purpose, we might explore it, but we understand it's not actually the choice that is a life choice for an individual. It would only be a temporary expression for a positive purpose of instruction and education.
And since humans may have some trepidations about ETs, the idea that ET civilizations, many of them, functioning at the same level as yours would be similar that way, that there's nothing to fear from ET civilizations that function above a certain frequency.
Correct. Yes, because it simply doesn't go hand in hand with that frequency.
Is there any that we know of that function at like a lower frequency, like the Pleiadians or the gray? Well, the grays don't exist now, so
yes, but the idea of the grays, as they are weaning out, becoming the hybrid civilization, is again, remember, they're not true extraterrestrials. They're mutated humans from a parallel Earth. So in that sense, they almost don't count.
I see.
That's why you can interact with them.
So just to get really specific, like what frequency level do most of these ET civilizations that we're hearing about, like the Pleiadians or others, what
high
frequency?
Enough? We're not going to give you numbers.
Okay, but they're high enough that we don't have to be concerned about them doing something negative to us.
No. There is no civilization you are interacting with other than a random visitation here and there by beings that may be of a slightly lower frequency, but there is nothing you're interacting with on your planet that you actually need to be afraid of.
That's wonderful. This one person is writing in that there are more and more films coming out focused on the idea of open contact, such as one Pixar film which came out, it's coming out next year, Elio, similar to Ely. While you explain that means the reflection between us, this film is supposed to be about a boy who gets transported to the other side of the universe to be an Earth ambassador to other societies throughout the universe.
Yes.
Can you comment on this collective manifestation?
Well, as we have said, all of your art usually reflects shifts in your consciousness. So because you are now more open to exploring the idea of open contact, obviously your art is going to reflect that in a variety of ways. It has been doing so for quite some time. You have your Star Trek and things like that have been showing that the collective consciousness of your world is preparing itself to be able to have open contact with extraterrestrial species. So you're bound to see more of this as you get closer to the idea of open contact being a real experience for you on a daily basis.
Just wonderful.
It is full of wonder.
Excuse me?
It is full of wonder, yes. Wonderful.
It's wonder. I mean, just the idea that our generation is the one that gets to experience this first contact is amazing.
Well, all the generations that exist on your planet. And one of the reasons that upcoming film depicts a young child is because the children are a different species. And to them, the idea of contact with extraterrestrials will be part of their daily routine eventually and will not be considered unusual.
Well, Earth has come a long way. Let's just say that.
The Earth you're on now has always been this way. Remember that you're shifting constantly.
Right. Fascinating. So what is the first thing a Sasani child is taught?
Unconditional love. That it is the vibration of existence itself, and to align and match with that. All else falls into place through pure synchronism.
Okay. And you say that approximately 5% of you comes through Darryl when he's channeling.
Energetically, yes.
Does that mean that we only get 5% of the fullness of your answers to the questions? And this is because we can only resonate with 5% of you?
No, that's a slightly different thing. The amount of information you do get from us does fluctuate in percentage from time to time based on what it is we perceive you can process. But the idea that only about 5 to 10% of my energy comes through, Darryl, doesn't necessarily have a basis for what the percentages of the amount of information we give you when asked specific questions. It will fluctuate on a different way, in a different scale.
Okay. And this person wants to know how we can help our loved ones, everyone awake or not, to get on the right train.
You can only share with them what it is you believe will help them. That's all you can do. Whatever it is they choose to do with that information is none of your business, as we have said many times. So that's the best you can do, is just give them the option, give them the opportunity to examine and explore and think about the idea of other paths they could take, other options they could choose, other choices they can make. That's it. And be a living example of making those choices yourself so they can see in you, living in you, the effect of having made those positive choices. It's the best way to entice them to make those positive choices on their own. But again, you cannot expect or insist that they must, because you don't know what their path is. You don't know what it is they need to explore. So it's none of your business what they choose to do with the information you share. But sharing that information and living as an example of that information is the best you can do.
And when you noted that in 2012 there was a big split and the path that we could take, I was wondering if we were all on the same path. This is what this person is saying. And if we are here today on this forum, how does that split relate to this split?
As we have said, the splitting prism is still going on. There are many paths, not just 2 or 3. But the idea is that as a general collective group, those that are exploring consciousness, the expansion of consciousness, exploring the idea of the concept of open contact and interacting with us and other beings like us, are in general moving along the same general path, going through the same general versions of Earth to some degree collectively, even though every individual still has their own unique reality. But you can have made agreements to go along with certain groups that are willing to shift to similar Earths over and over in the same way that still contains the idea of the expansion of consciousness and the acceptance of your part of being a galactic family.
And do any of the ET ships have weapons on them?
Not any of ours. We do have what you may call shields, energy shells around the ship that can protect us from various phenomenology, but it's not used in that sense as defense per se in the way that you mean it, because again, through pure synchronism, we don't attract a need to defend ourselves. That's just simply not in our reality.
So since none of the ETs we are interacting with have negative intention towards us, does that mean that none of them have weapons on their ships?
They have things that could be adapted into a form of weaponry to get your attention in a variety of ways, but I wouldn't, again, really call it weaponry. It can simply be that energy can be adapted in the way they use it and the way we use it for various purposes that could act as a demonstration of the power that we have at our disposal and the technology we have at our disposal, but we wouldn't actually ever fashion them into pure weaponry.
Okay. Okay, so going in a little different direction now. One person was wondering how many instances where a miscarriage has occurred does the soul of the infant actually enter the body, or does it wait to see if the body is viable? For instance, her mother miscarried before her birth and before her sister's birth. Were those other instances two distinct soul identities, or were they simply she and her sister waiting for viable bodies?
In a sense, yes, the second idea. But most souls either do wait until the body is viable, or they may dip in to have a certain experience temporarily and then leave. The idea in general is that most souls don't really fully connect to the idea of a new infant until just before birth. They may dip in and out during that time, but they don't really fully commit, and maybe not even for a few years even after birth. Hence the idea of what you call crib death, with no discernible reason. So the idea is that for the most part, most souls do not really commit or connect to a body until just before birth, in general.
Okay, and when you were mentioning that about crib death, they've found that when babies are sleeping with another human being, it helps to regulate their breath, and that can be a preventative for crib death. Is that related to what you're saying there too? I mean,
Yes, to some degree, because again, there are agreements that are made that will allow the child to function in the way it needs to function in physical reality, and that may attract an adult to work with the child either through breath or other methodologies to allow the child to really cross the bridge from non-physical into physical reality in a way that it can thrive. So it just depends upon the themes of exploration and the agreements that have been made.
Okay. When a person crosses over into spirit, can you clarify if it's the personality that continues to exist for eternity, or is there some specific, like from one specific life, or does that being...
Yes, there will always be a part of that continues to exist that is representative of the experience of a specific life. Again, similar in analogy to the idea that there will always be knowledge and experience within you from your childhood, even though you're not a child anymore. It never goes away. It's always there and always can be tapped into. So the idea of having a life experience is something that is then simply part of the soul itself. You can simply say the spirit is the specific representation or symbol or reflection of the life experience, and that becomes part of the soul and is always accessible. So yes, it always remains, even though the soul may be bigger and greater, and the oversoul even bigger and greater than that. You never lose anything, and that particular aspect of the being can always be accessed and tapped into from many different sources, including the physical person who may need to interact with that aspect of the greater soul to recognize the being and recognize the person they knew in life. So it's always there. It just becomes part of something bigger, in the same way that your childhood became part of something more experienced as an adult.
And how does that relate to the idea of the independent frames that actually have no motion, and it's the projection of consciousness through them that creates the ongoing time experience with it?
Well, yes, but now you're talking simply about a mechanism by which you have a certain kind of physical experience. What is it you're attempting to relate to what we talked about previously?
In spirit, when the personality still exists, but it's no longer is it living as a spirit, or is it...
Everything exists at once, remember? In that sense, the spirit, the personality, the physical being all exist at the same time and can be accessed by the soul from any number of directions. So the idea is that there are frames on every level except the one. Every level, because as soon as there is any experience of division at all, as soon as there is any experience of an other than yourself, then there are frames by definition. It's just that the experience of time and space in those frames is different from level to level.
I don't know who thought this up, but it's pretty amazing.
It just is the nature and structure of existence itself in the way that it must function by definition.
Many people have negative experiences when studying, especially in Asia, this individual is saying. Studying sometimes becomes torture, and children are taught to accept that as their fate. Why do people have a belief that we have to study hard and memorize and to grasp knowledge and technology? How do we free people from this unnatural way of studying? And perhaps you could also share some other ways that we can study so that it's not like that.
All right. Well, we have actually explained this many times, but the reason that it seems ensconced in your society to memorize things comes from long ago when you were hunter-gatherers And you needed to memorize certain kinds of hunting paths, certain kinds of places where there might be danger, where there might be food, where you could be taught to understand how to do things in a certain way and memorize those things for your own safety and for your ability to thrive. And it's simply been handed down through the generations for thousands of years that memorizing things like that would actually be to your benefit. And to some degree, it can be. But as we have explained several times, the idea of actually creating scenarios in which you can experience things directly, what you may euphemistically refer to as learning on the job, is actually the better way to learn something and instill it within yourselves, because as long as what it is you are needing to learn to thrive in physical reality is adapted to what you are really passionate about, you will retain it. And in fact, you will become excited about learning, and you'll absorb information very readily and retain it very readily, because it's based on the idea of being taught to you through the auspices of your passion and what excites you, rather than simply suppressing your excitement to learn something in a way that isn't necessarily representative of your passion. So creating simulations, experiences that are interactive and immersive, and teaching you the things that are important in your society that way is what will allow you to have fun doing it and retain it, because you're doing it in the way that you're already excited to learn, by opening up your passion in ways that make it relatable to learn the things that you really need to learn, and to know the difference between the things you actually do need to learn and the things you don't need to learn.
So just accepting the idea that we'll need to know what we need to know when we need to know it, as is true for your existence, that can be very natural for us eventually.
Yes, eventually, when you actually learn to rely on pure synchronism. But until then, you can practice the idea of creating imaginary and creative, immersive experiences that allow you to have experiences in a safe way that will teach you what you really need to know to thrive in physical reality, without compressing your passion into a box.
And what is the difference between insisting on something and knowing something?
When you know something, you will know the difference between the two, because insistence still carries with it the idea that you don't actually believe in it yourself. You don't actually know it yourself. You're actually trying to convince yourself of something that may or may not be relative to you. So the idea of knowing is just something that is absolutely known by you, as if it is something that you breathe, something that is part of you, something that you know is true and in alignment with who and what you are and what your relationship to existence is. Insistence implies that you don't really buy into the power of the thing you're insisting about. You're not really convinced yourself.
What about when a person feels angry at something that is said to them? How can you manage that anger?
By understanding that what is said to them has nothing to do with them, if that in case is the fact. So the idea, again, as we have given an analogy, is as if a total stranger has come up to you and said something. You don't react because you know that they know nothing about you, and therefore what they're saying to you has more to do with their issues and their processes than it has to do with you. They're just using you as a sounding board, projecting their issues onto you. And you know this, so there's no reason to react. Now, you can always look at the advice or the sayings that someone gives you and say, well, is there something here for me? Is there something I need to know about myself that would help me to benefit from and change? But if you understand that what they're saying has nothing to do with you, then why would you react? So you have to look at your own beliefs about why you believe what they're saying is true.
And what's the connection between anger and grief?
Well, again, both to some degree are judgments of a sort that assume certain things that may not be so. So the idea of grief is, again, the definition that something has been lost and you are going into a state of being abandoned, of feeling abandoned in that sense, whether it is true abandonment or not. The idea of anger can be, again, based on your expectations of what you insisted should be, and not allowing what is to be what needs to be. So they're loosely connected. And the idea is one is a reaction mostly to things that were insisted on by you, and the other is a reaction to the concept that you have lost something, when in fact no loss has actually happened, if you open up your senses to the fact that things have simply shifted into a different form.
And that translates into a different attitude about change and things that come and go in physical reality, because physical reality is a projection of consciousness.
And a temporary one at that.
So is that sort of our maturation process to understand the nature of the reality that we're in and be more accepting of the coming and going and not suffer so much when we